Hello and welcome to another episode of Bitcoin in Asia. I'm John Riggins and excited to share a lively conversation today with BitBnS CEO Gaurav Dahake. BitBnS is now the largest Bitcoin exchange in India by volume, and their team has rolled out a number of other products focused on onboarding people into Bitcoin. Gaurav first founded successful e-commerce tool plugin Buyhatke and knows what it takes to grow in the Indian market. So this is really full of learnings on that market in India. We dive into sentiment around Bitcoin generally, population segments in India that Gaurav believes are natural adopters, and how BitBnS is expanding its business to pull those segments into Bitcoin. We clear up the current regulatory situation and the development of that situation over the past 3 years that led to BitBnS, which he founded less than 3 years ago, taking that market-leading role. We also get an inside perspective on what it takes to build a successful business in India more generally from someone who has now built two, and a perspective on the momentum in the India FinTech scene and its key drivers. I learned a ton here, and I hope you'll enjoy it. Gaurav, nice to see you here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot for having me, John. It's a pleasure to kind of come on this.
Fantastic. Would love to be doing this in person, but unfortunately I am quarantined in the US, and you're at your home base, so doing a remote interview today. But can you tell us where you are, where the office is?
Sure. So we're based out of Bangalore. So Bangalore is like the tech hub of India. Most of the fledgling startups from India are from Bangalore. And a lot of interesting technology, even with respect to fintech, blockchain, and a lot of innovations are kind of happening from Bangalore. So that's where we are kind of centered on the Bitcoin innovation system. Is also seeing a lot of interesting work that is kind of happening from Bangalore.
Yeah, fantastic. And I guess also some context for you, kind of your background in India, some of your kind of ideological foundation from kind of university days. Give us some of that.
Sure. So I graduated from IIT Kharagpur, the same college from which the Google CEO kind of hails from, Sundar Pichai. And it was exciting to kind of see a lot of the alumni that have kind of done fairly meaningful work, visiting the rooms, kind of seeing what they were like in the earlier days, and was always kind of keen on doing something of my own. So back in my first year of college, I decided that there are 44 possible things that I can do. I can be a teacher, I can be a researcher, I can become an administrative officer, all those things. And I sequentially started eliminating all of that. And by the end of my fourth year, I was clear that, hey, entrepreneurship is something what I want to kind of do, and this is something that I kind of enjoy. So started working on some projects, got a job from college, worked there for 45 days, quit on Independence Day, and then started working full-time on a company. That company was centered around price comparison. So the context is in 2013. In India, there was a lot of new e-commerce companies coming. So Flipkart was one, Amazon just launched in India. There are quite a few others. So for a normal consumer, getting the best price was fairly difficult. So we launched a tool around that, and that's kind of fairly popular. Even on a daily basis now, about $250,000 is saved by users by using the tool. So the tool operates similar to something like a Honey extension that is out there in the US. That's something that we kind of
in the news these days.
Yes.
And so it's 2013. You graduate. You take a good job out of college, and 45 days in, you're saying, "Hey, I gotta get out on my own." And so you're thinking about what to do. You're thinking about what to do. E-commerce is kind of where you see a way to plug in initially. What's kind of your founding group there? Is it university friends?
Right. So college friends. So all three. So we have three founders. So I'm one. The tech guy is Prashant, and the design and UX guy is Srikanth. So all three of us came from the same hostel from the college, and we were anyways working on a few projects back in college. And then decided to kind of tune in together and work something full-time on this.
Cool. Also interested, how big is like a graduating class from that university? Or how big is like enrollment?
So about 1,000 people from my batch that kind of graduated.
Yeah, it's pretty small, pretty obviously selective. Cool CEO. Cool.
Right.
So that company, what's that company called?
It's called Buyhatke. So that's kind of fairly used in India, fairly popular in India, the largest in this particular space. And the ideal context that we had in mind was we should build a company on a fundamental that does not change over a period of time. So that's when we kind of decided to start on something that if we give people products at the best possible price, they would be using that 5 years or 10 years down the line as well, right? Mm-hmm. So instead of catching a particular trend like, hey, VR is a trend, AR is a trend, and we'll kind of build something on top of that, we decided to go the reverse way around and saying, hey, what is something that is fundamentally not going to change? People would always want the best price if it's given to them in a frictionless manner. So that's what we kind of started building. So Buyhatke is the first thing that we kind of launched, and that kind of has grown to a certain extent. Yeah. And that's the context kind of came into being. How do we either help users save money or help them make money or reduce the commerce friction? If we do some of these things, that's going to be valuable 5, 10, 15 years down the line. So that's when we also kind of stumbled on crypto. The idea being people would be able to kind of make money from crypto while trading or investment. Mm-hmm. And how do we kind of facilitate an angle to that? So we initially were not kind of thinking of building an exchange. The idea centered more around how do we build more like an arbitrage bot? And back in 2017, there used to be massive arbitrages across different exchanges. Right. There were a lot of new altcoins that were kind of coming in. So that's the overall genesis that we had in mind. Our first brush with Bitcoin was back in college in 2012. And that's when Bitcoin price was kind of showing upwards trend. And that's when we decided we'll try and mine Bitcoin. Okay. Rather than chasing Bitcoin, we thought we'll mine it. So we assembled a system. We kind of ordered parts from Amazon US and kind of assembled all that computer. And we were able to mine a few Satoshis. But after that, the system gave up. It was not able to kind of do it. So, that was the initial brush. Then we kind of didn't kind of follow crypto as a whole or the Bitcoin ecosystem. Okay. 2017 is when everything kind of started coming back. Yeah. There was a lot of excitement that was happening, and that's when we decided we'll start something around the space. Yeah. So
2017, you're 4 years into a startup that has traction, right. Revenue. And then you start saying, "Hey, Bitcoin's getting more interesting again. How can we, incorporate this back into our business, right. Or do something? Are you going to start something new, or is your whole kind of founding team on board with this, or is this you driving it?"
Yeah, so that was the idea from the tech guy. So okay. Prashant was kind of pretty keen on that. Hey, this looks like a pretty interesting challenge as well. So building more like a trading engine by itself is a pretty complex challenge. Building a performant one at that. And also, there was a lot of interesting possibilities that was kind of coming along with crypto as a whole. So we're like, how do we kind of build something on top of that can give access to people to invest into Bitcoin through a platform?
Yeah. Can you give us also a little context on kind of the Bitcoin ecosystem in India in 2017? I think people who are kind of following back then think of like a couple of exchanges that had a little bit of name value for people out here. Right. And I think that's changed a lot, obviously, since then. And so, kind of give us a little insight into where it was in 2017.
So, India did not have a single exchange by 2017. So, all of the things that were out there were brokerages. Mm-hmm. So, we used to kind of see more like a buy and sell rate, and there used to be a spread of 5 or 10% in terms of that buy and sell. Yeah. And that sort of a brokerage used to kind of happen. So that's when in 2017, a couple of teams kind of came in. They started building an exchange, and they got in pretty solid traction. They kind of did say roughly around $7-8 million in revenue in a span of 4 months. That's when there was a lot of interest around that. We also were kind of building something parallelly. We kind of launched the exchange, and we innovated a lot to kind of get in users to us. So at that point in time, some of these exchanges were very popular and were doing trading volumes of $50 or $100 million a day. And to kind of attract users, what we did was more like a Bitcoin flash sale. So flash sale as a concept is kind of pretty popular in India and China. So what typically happens is something like a Xiaomi phone is there, right? So all these phones or e-commerce products, they are kind of usually kind of sold in a flash sale where in a short span of say 5 or 10 seconds, there are thousands of pieces. People kind of aggregate there and they kind of try and book that. And that's kind of for a cheaper price point. So we did the same with Bitcoin, and we said, okay, we'll give you a Bitcoin for half the price.
Okay, you got to explain that a little more to me.
Yeah, so we'll give you Bitcoin for half the price, but you can only buy up to $10.
Okay.
Okay, so that way, that was more like our customer acquisition strategy that we'll kind of burn up to 3 Bitcoins. We bought 3 Bitcoins from the market and we're like, we'll burn up to 3 Bitcoins. And that can give us a decent set of users to build liquidity on the exchange.
Yeah, interesting.
So that was right. So, and we kind of, this went pretty viral. So there were a lot of YouTube videos that got created and all. Some of them also started calling up scams and all, ki, hey, these guys might be scammed, that they're giving it for half the price and everything. But when people actually got it and all, the credibility got built in. And we kind of launched successive flash sales regularly. And a lot of people kind of came in from that. So we roughly acquired about 3,000 plus users via this mode. And that kind of helped us gain interaction, credibility, and get the word out amongst users.
Cool. So you're seeing these arbitrage opportunities. You say, hey, let's have our first kind of product focus on that, and then quickly you get into, hey, how do we get users purchasing Bitcoin? And you have these kind of user acquisition methods for doing that. They're pretty novel, I would say, for folks who are over here at least. Did you have kind of at that point, did you have kind of a grand strategy to say, hey, let's build the biggest Bitcoin exchange in India, or was it more, hey, we're dipping our feet into this and we're adding kind of features, products to our existing business? How are you thinking about it?
Right. So frankly, we didn't expect we would be able to become the largest in India, and the sentiment and everything was kind of fairly different at that point in time. Some of the exchanges were already doing significant volumes and all. And that's when, after a certain point in time, the financial regulator kind of decided that they'll cut out the banking access to users. And once that kind of started happening, a lot of these earlier exchanges were not able to innovate. They're not able to figure out what sort of a mechanism do we kind of do. And that's when we kind of went back to fundamentals. And the fundamentals say, even if you open the Bitcoin white paper, it's peer-to-peer electronic cash. And that's what we kind of took into, hey, we have to bring something peer-to-peer. If you bring something peer-to-peer, it becomes unbreakable to a fairly large degree, like the way, say, a torrent works, right? In spite of, say, Hollywood, Netflix, and a lot of these very powerful entities behind who have kind of tried attacking Torrent has survived, and Torrent has hundreds of millions of users on a monthly basis, right? So, and that's when we kind of decided, hey, if we do not have a banking access, if we do not have payment processing, that's not going to stop us. We would continue operating, and we've kind of internally kept that motto and also publicly told that many times. As long as Bitcoin is there, BitBnS would be there. So we want to ensure that as long as the Bitcoin ecosystem would be thriving, we would kind of continue operating and become more like a tool or an enabler for people to get into Bitcoin.
Okay. Hey, take us back to, real quick, take us back to kind of the genesis of what you're talking about is some new, I guess, regulation that came out. Can you be a little more specific in explaining kind of the banking access situation for companies versus customers, things like that?
Right. Sure. So India has one of the most sophisticated banking ecosystems in the world. So I can transfer money from my wallet to any other person in India, and it's a country of 1.3 billion people. I can transfer to anyone in India within a span of a second.
Oh, wow.
I just need something like a UPI ID. The UPI is Unified Payments Interface that India has kind of bought in.
Okay.
And this is a system that the US is trying to kind of adopt. So even Google is behind kind of getting the United States to kind of adopt that sort of a system, because even the payment system that is out there in US is fairly archaic. From one person to other person, if you want to send money, that's not instant right now from the banking channel.
Yep.
You have Venmo, PayPal, and a few of these things, but
relying on services that are on top of that where the money's not actually really moving from place to place. It's more of at the application level they're doing things. So this is actually India's banking system allows for these transfers.
Right. So that's the protocol that has been kind of developed, which is cross banks, and India has 200 plus banks. So cross banks, any sort of a payment movement or something that is to be happened can just happen with more like email ID sort of a system.
Yeah.
And people can transact that. So that was there. So crypto was kind of flourishing. 2017 was an insane period. There was a lot of movement in terms of crypto. And some of these exchanges started coming. There was payment access, banking access, and everything in place. Mm-hmm. And there was significant amount of transactions that were flowing. So significant in the sense of up to $50 to $100 million worth of fiat inflows and outflows that were happening to every single exchange. So that was a very, very substantial amount of fiat inflow and outflow that was happening from an exchange. And that's when the financial regulator decided to cut off the payment processing access. Then over a period of time, they also cut off the banking access. And that's when it became difficult for quite a few of these exchanges to survive. So this regulation came into being on April 2018, so roughly around a couple of years back. And since then, about most of the other exchanges, about 6 or 7 other exchanges have kind of closed. So the largest players that were out there at that point in time, there was a company called Zappay, there was UnoCoin, there was Coinix. All of them have kind of closed, and none of them are kind of operating now. The reason that they're kind of more comfortable with the centralized banking access, payment processing, and everything, and they didn't kind of move to a peer-to-peer innovation on top of that, which was critical to survive in the context. And even right now, we're seeing pretty healthy volumes in terms of fiat deposits and withdrawals with our system, where even we don't hold custody of any of the users' funds. That's the basic principle that we kind of had, that if you want to get real crypto innovation into place, if you want to thrive the Bitcoin ecosystem as a whole, you need to kind of get more and more decentralized and educate people ki, hey, you should over a period of time not trust any exchange or intermediary or something. You should start holding things. But that's a gradual process. You need to kind of take people through that. The first iteration of that, we kind of started with the exchange. The exchange has kind of done well. We have over 70% market share, have significant inflows of fiat and all. People can also margin trade on the exchange with Forex leverage. So all that is done.
Interesting. So on that inflow, outflow side of fiat for your business, the situation is that if you're operating any kind of business where you're touching crypto, you personally can't hold customer funds in fiat. And so the way around that is they're depositing funds into, is it an offshore entity? Or it's okay.
So that's the interesting part that we've kind of created. So there's globally no such equivalent out there. So it's a global first. So what we essentially did was, it's more like a fiat matching engine.
Okay.
So think of it this way, that the exchange is more like a system where there is a constant stream of depositors on one side and withdrawers on one side. What we have done is, in the exchange, people can have an open order book, people can place their buy and sell bids. But outside of it, when they want to say, I as a user want to deposit money into the exchange, I'll get paired with a person who is trying to withdraw money from the exchange.
Gotcha.
Okay, so that person directly sees that person's bank account or the UPI ID, he transfers him. This person gets credit into his BitBnS wallet. That person gets money back into his bank account. And that's how the entire flow works. So as a whole, normally a peer-to-peer thing works in this way, that you are selling me Bitcoin and I'm buying Bitcoin. I'll send you the money. But this is not that way. What is happening here is a person has already sold his Bitcoin. He has got something in his INR wallet on BitBnS. He's placing a withdrawal request. That withdrawal request gets matched with a deposit request from a particular user. And the depositor sends money to the withdrawer's bank account. The depositor's INR wallet on BitBnS is credited.
Very interesting. And so you had a situation where companies that had infrastructure in place based on kind of previous regulatory situations weren't able to kind of move as fast as companies that were just starting out and were able to kind of build the processes from the ground up to comply with the new situation. So it's interesting. Do you know of any companies outside of India that are kind of operating in this way? It seems like something that could be, maybe we'll get to that in a second with kind of y'all's international things. So that kind of last change happened 2018-ish. Has there been anything else significant since then? Is anything new in the pipe?
Right. So interestingly, what happened with say 2018 and 2019 was, in 2019 the Bitcoin dominance kind of obviously became a lot stronger, and people started kind of gravitating a lot more towards Bitcoin. And the genesis of Bitcoin being more like a digital equivalent of gold started rooting into the minds of few Indians. So India is one of the largest holders of gold in the world. So Indians kind of hold gold a lot, and it's used as an accessory and also more like an investment in India. So just to kind of give you context, so in the last 50 years, gold has appreciated roughly around 400 times with respect to the Indian rupee.
Wow.
So that's a lot of appreciation that has kind of happened with respect to the value of gold. So people are also starting to realize that gold already is at kind of a mature phase. There is a lot of gold that is out there. And when they're kind of trying to see the narrative with respect to this Bitcoin, they're kind of seeing the value there. Hey, this is also pretty interesting. And it's nascent asset class. It has been only there for about 10, 11 years. But over a period of time, if a sufficient number of people kind of start seeing this is valuable, this can grow pretty big. So a lot of them are also warming up to the idea of Bitcoin. They're starting to invest into Bitcoin. It's just that we want to enable it, the ecosystem in such a way that a lot more come into the Indian ecosystem, into Bitcoin and crypto as a whole. So the idea is that the investor asset class is missing from crypto right now. A lot of it is a speculative asset class, and the investor asset class did come in. They burned their hands with ICOs and other things that kind of happened over a period of time. And now they've realized that across all the assets, Bitcoin is the best performing asset, even with crypto, and that it's more sensible to kind of invest into it. So we want to kind of create products through which they can essentially invest systematically into this Bitcoin. And that's the genesis with which we have kind of recently also launched a new product. And that's kind of growing pretty well.
Interesting. Take us through the current products of BitBnS. And one other question, is the company set up as a separate entity from, I guess it would make sense too if there's this banking kind of risk around things.
Right. So the company is set up as a separate entity. It's registered in Estonia. The parent company is Buyhatke, but with the regulatory challenges and all that were kind of happening here, we kind of registered it outside. And one of the motive of that was also that we'd be going global. We'd be also launching in other countries. So we right now operate in 3 different countries, India, UAE, and Thailand. So the plan is to kind of launch in a few other countries. Start with trading as a whole, also look into remittance as a piece of the puzzle. So remittance is something that we're kind of also exploring. So the 3 main motives that we're kind of looking at is getting into other countries. The second is after that drive remittance. So India is the world's largest remittance market. There is $80 billion plus that kind of flows back to India every single year. So if you kind of see that even in the US, a lot of prominent companies, the CEOs and the C-level executives are from India.
Sure.
And so there's a lot of remittance that kind of flows back. And we're kind of seeing that crypto can become an effective bridge in terms of reduce, right? So a Bitcoin transfer hardly takes 10 minutes from one person to the other, right? And there's hardly any cost involved in terms of doing that, right? But typical intermediaries on the finance of the fiat side typically take about 2 to 3% and take 1 or 2 days to kind of send the remittance. So that's something we are kind of working on cracking. The second part of the puzzle is pretty interesting. The second part of the puzzle is bringing in the investor asset class. So investor class, we are kind of bringing in a way where we have created a structured product. It's called BitDroplet. And what it does is, so anyone who wants to invest into Bitcoin, they can invest with as little as $1 a day. And it's an dollar cost averaging tool. We launched it about a couple of months back, and we are seeing very strong traction onto this. A lot of people have started investing into this on a daily basis. They're kind of investing small fraction. And the idea is we want to, in the next 18 months, push this up to about 1 million users investing at least $1 a day. So if we get to about 1 million users investing $1 a day, and there would only be, say, about 900 Bitcoins that are coming into the market every single day, this becomes a fairly powerful proposition over a longer period of time.
For sure. So this is super interesting. I mean, the narratives here, they're rational and I think serve your users. So it's a digital gold narrative that even makes more sense in India because of the history of the importance of gold there, and then dollar cost averaging in. I think that makes a ton of sense. And BitDroplet. Okay.
Right.
And
returns in India have kind of lagged. So just to kind of give you context, the Indian rupee, which is a fiat currency in India, has depreciated by 800 times with respect to the US dollar.
In how long?
100 years.
100 years.
So 800 times it has depreciated. So an Indian rupee was more powerful than the US dollar in 1915, 1916. One Indian rupee was roughly around $8 at that point in time. And now it has reversed. $1 is about 70 Indian rupees. So that's the sort of depreciation that has happened. Essentially, this kind of means is if you are holding your money in your bank account or if you're investing into a fixed deposit, your appreciation of the money is lesser than the inflation that would be out there.
Mm-hmm.
And your purchasing power is going to depreciate over a longer period of time, right? So that's when and that's why precisely a lot of people also invest into gold, because they kind of intuitively understand this and they have been kind of investing into that. Interestingly, even the stock market returns in India have not been very substantial over the last decade or so. And that's when we're kind of trying to bring users into the alternative asset class investment, and the alternative asset class is Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
If a sufficient number of people start, and Bitcoin, if you kind of check the DCA returns, over every year, it has at least given a 20% plus return in any single year. In spite of, even if you started investing at the peak of Bitcoin when it was $19,000, till now, if you had invested systematically, you would have at least had 20% plus annual returns.
Yep.
So that's an exceptionally good return. And we're kind of just trying to warm up users up around that idea and bringing it to them.
Very cool. And so that's especially how you're thinking about the market in India. You kind of touched on some of your kind of global expansion plans and how you're thinking about those. UAE, I guess, obviously a place with a lot of immigrants from India. And so you're thinking about this remittance is also a way to kind of serve those folks and onboard new customers. Can you talk a little bit more about how you're thinking about expansion outside of India? Obviously, you have nice big goals in India. We'll have to catch up in a year on that 1 million user number for the Bit Droplet. So UAE, where else are you looking at expansion right now?
Right. So the idea being that we'll expand into countries that have a larger Indian audience, because if you're looking at driving remittance, that becomes more like an essential metric there. And we understand typically how do we kind of communicate or reach out to users in these particular geographies. So that's the overall idea and perspective. So we'll be launching one, interestingly, is Venezuela as a market is what we have kind of studying. A couple of European countries, so Italy and Spain, those are kind of on the radar in the near term. And some markets in Southeast Asia, so Indonesia, Malaysia, these are the markets that we are kind of targeting into. So this is the near-term expansion plan, and that should be kind of coming soon. In terms of the other products, we're also working on derivatives. So options is something that's being worked on, and BTC options would be kind of going live in a month's time.
Mm-hmm.
So that should kind of help get even the advanced set of users into the crypto fold. A lot of them kind of traditionally work on the stock market and all. We want to kind of bring them into the crypto ecosystem and showcase them. There is a larger volatility here. You have a larger option of kind of trading and kind of getting money from it.
Interesting. And is there much of a kind of like retail trading culture on the traditional markets in India? And it's kind of a stereotype, but really in Asia, it is a large retail market. How does that look in India?
Right. So India, even the Indian exchange, it's called the Sensex. Sensex, it stands for Sensitive Index, and Nifty. These are kind of among the top 10 exchanges in the world. So you have NASDAQ, NYSE, the Nikkei 225 and all. And even the Nifty has kind of picked up, while the infra is kind of pretty strong, through which people can kind of train. About 90% plus of the trading is automated entirely now. So there are kind of trading bots and all these automated systems through which that's kind of happening. Mm-hmm. So the market is kind of pretty large. On a daily basis, there is about $150 billion plus that gets traded into the traditional market, mm-hmm. which is a substantial value. A lot of the crypto trading volume is kind of fake across different exchanges. So if I have to kind of look into things, I would say there are only, say, about 20 odd exchanges that you can see on CoinMarketCap, which kind of showcase true volumes, right? So most of the other exchanges kind of also.
Sure.
Crypto does not have the set of volume that is kind of visually kind of visible, but still, if we can bring some of these people who kind of are a lot more advanced in terms of how they trade and all into crypto, that should help improve the infra, and a lot of them can become evangelists in terms of getting more advanced, say an ETF sort of a product or anything of that sort. Because if they see better returns, if they see better opportunities here, they'll be definitely be evangelists for kind of bringing something of this sort.
Yeah, interesting.
One of the things that we're also kind of focusing on is how do we kind of make crypto payments more rewarding than traditional fiat. So what essentially has happened with Bitcoin or crypto as a whole is it has not been adopted a lot on the merchant end, right? So our core focus is how do we kind of make a very strong use case, like you should be able to pay on top of Amazon using Bitcoin. Okay, and if you do that, we are ready to reward you, say a 3% or a 4% cash back for doing that. So that's the overall perspective. That's one project that's kind of in the pipeline. So the labs team here is kind of working on that, trying to kind of figure out how do we kind of make it a seamless flow. At the checkout, using a Chrome extension, will kind of showcase that flow where people can directly do that, get a QR, scan it, use Lightning or something to kind of make the transaction instant. And once it's kind of there, we already have a working relationship with Amazon on a fiat to fiat basis because of our
first business,
right? So we can settle them off fiat. We know how to collect crypto because we run an exchange. We know how to convert crypto to fiat because we run a crypto to fiat exchange. And we also have a fiat working relationship with Amazon. So those are the three pieces of the puzzle, and we know how to kind of collect and convert all of them. So we are trying to figure out the UX of that. And the idea is if we make crypto more rewarding than fiat. So with fiat, if you had to pay $100, with crypto, you only need to pay $97. You are a lot more likely to explore crypto. And that $3-4 difference is going to come from Amazon because they are willing to pay us for driving that additional user.
Yep. All right. Obviously, you have a kind of strategy for onboarding, different user groups based on kind of what they're doing already. I guess something that's kind of been a trend in the US or gained some popularity are services like Lolly and Pay, where you're spending fiat and then they return a percentage of Bitcoin to you. Is that an aspect of this as well, or you're more focused on the spending and receiving Bitcoin back?
So the Lolly aspect is also something that we're kind of gradually adding. The first focus area is around the spending part of it. So Lolly is more on the cashback side of things. So cashback is something we are anyways giving, but we want to be able to give users an option to spend. So if they're able to kind of spend that, they see real world utility for small transactions and all.
Got it.
That's going to be powerful over a longer period of time.
All right. Quick back to kind of the boring topic of regulation, but something I think there's been a lot of kind of fake news or incorrect interpretation of in the West of what's happening in India.
Right.
So can you talk a little bit about how you interact with the regulators there, the central kind of banking system there, who the governing bodies are that you need to be dealing with today, and just give a little bit of a sense of how that interaction happens and kind of the trust that you have in the process?
So right now, the central financial regulator that controls all the banks and payment processing is called the Reserve Bank of India. And the Reserve Bank of India was responsible for kind of bringing in the regulation which cut off the payment processing and access there. The other regulator is the Securities and Exchange Board of India. It's more like SEC that is out there. It's called SEBI. And that usually deals with respect to, say, asset classes, securities, and other things. So SEBI has not been very vocal around crypto as a whole. It has been RBI who has been kind of treating crypto more like money and kind of essentially trying to block the access of people to that. And we've tried educating a lot of them about that if you try banning something like crypto, it's not going to work because there is a lot of undercurrent activity and other things that would kind of keep happening, right? So if you try and kind of ban something like torrent, it does not work. It still kind of mushrooms along and on. And we kind of wrote a lot of articles. We explained them with statistics. So just to kind of give you context, pawn in India is banned. But India is the largest consumer of porn in the world.
Okay.
So that's the counterintuitive thing. And we kind of showed them stats and data and all. And it's like you tried banning this, but it does not work. Similarly, there is a state in India called Uttar Pradesh. So Uttar Pradesh is the largest state in India. The state is that large that it would be 2/3 of the size of United States in terms of population. So
okay. 200 million people in this state.
Yeah. So, and it tried banning beef. And even now it's the world's 5th largest producer and exporter of beef. So we kind of tried explaining them that, hey, if you are not able to ban simpler things which are even exist in the physical world and all, if you try banning something like this, it's going to be a lot more tricky to kind of enforce something when you kind of actually have a problem. So something like where there is some sort of problem with respect to counterfeiting, terrorist financing, anything of that sort. If you have kind of completely blocked it, neither are your officers going to be trained, neither is anyone going to reveal you any data, and you would not kind of have any access to that. So it's better if you kind of try and regulate it. A lot of people would be kind of willing to actually trade in a compliant manner and furnish details and all of that. Crypto, in spite of the roots being kind of counterintuitive to compliance and other things in general, but the idea is a lot of people who want to trade or say just kind of make money from trading or anything of that sort, they want to kind of remain compliant with the law. And right now, a lot of them kind of think crypto is more like anti-law, it's illegal and all of that. So right now, to all the people in the West, I would like to say crypto
is not PSA.
Number one. So it's perfectly fine for a person to hold, trade, or mine crypto in India, Bitcoin, or any other asset. You can mine it, you can trade it, you can hold it, the rest of it.
Perfectly legal.
There is no law framed around that. The only thing that has happened is the central financial regulator has cut out the banking access for exchanges. And that has been misinterpreted by a lot of different publications, media, and other things.
Yep.
And even when I kind of go to a conference, say in Singapore and all, and when I say I'm from India and we run a crypto to fiat exchange, and they're like, is crypto legal in India? Right? What are you saying?
Yeah, are you a criminal?
Right. So around this, there is also something interesting that is kind of happening. So there was a case filed the very next day when the banking access was cut off, and there is a Supreme Court case that is going with the financial regulator and crypto exchanges. And the arguments on both the sides have been heard. And the Supreme Court has said that within a span of 3 weeks, they would most likely come up with a decision, and a conclusion would be kind of telling that to the masses. So a lot of them are kind of eagerly awaiting that and looking forward towards it.
All right, great. We'll make sure to bold that in the show notes. The whole monologue there. Great. So since you have all these different products that you're kind of launching and working on, give us a sense of kind of the competitive landscape of companies focusing on Bitcoin now. So I think something that did get some attention was kind of Binance's entrance into the market a little bit with that acquisition a little bit ago. Give some context for that, what that means, and then kind of the competitive landscape of exchanges versus other kind of Bitcoin adjacent products.
Right. There are kind of, so as I said, a lot of exchanges kind of closed when the regulatory they tried to kind of fighting it out, but it didn't work. A lot of them didn't have the intention to kind of make it work. So that was the case. Right now, there are kind of 3 major exchanges that are kind of working in India. With the largest, BitBnS is kind of there, where you can trade with INR, and there is significant liquidity over 250 BTC plus on a daily basis kind of gets traded. And then there is an exchange called WazirX that was acquired by Binance. The acquisition happened fairly recently, about 3 months back. And that kind of showcases a smart move on Binance, and one that what Binance has figured out is they have not been able to run fiat exchanges, which is a clear kind of. So if you see the volume of Binance Uganda, Binance Jersey, Binance Singapore, the cumulative volume of all 3 exchanges combined is not 50 BTC, which is a very, very low volume considering the trading fees is hardly 5 basis points. The Binance brand name is there, and you're accepting fiat for over 65 countries. So it clearly suggests that there is something that they're kind of missing from the equation. And that's when they decided they would kind of try and kind of seek local partners. So Binance also talked with us. They're also kind of keen to kind of discuss things with us and all. And we're not kind of keen on to kind of go on an acquisition route per se. Reason being, we have kind of fought hard for the last 2 years when all things were kind of going wrong. And now we kind of see that things are kind of getting positive. There is, of course, a Supreme Court case and all. We've been trying to liaise with few regulators and trying to kind of educate them what's happening, how can we kind of improve and all of that. And now we would not want to kind of have more like, we want to kind of build something that is kind of built from India and taken to the world, rather than kind of having a Chinese dominance everywhere. So that's the perspective in place. And so that's why we decided to kind of stay independent. We kind of continue operating this way and would love to kind of scale it along to a large extent where we become among the top 5 exchanges in the world.
Makes sense. On the funding side, tell us about your thoughts, strategy on the fundraising side. I think you raised a little bit of money for your first startup.
So with BitBnS, we have been kind of cash flow positive from day one. So right now, and we've kind of, with respect to revenues, we've grown 3x over the last year. So 2018, whatever revenue we did, 2019, we did 3 times of that. And that has kind of scaled around significantly. It's upwards of $1 million plus in terms of revenues that is kind of going. And target that is out there in mind is we want to kind of scale it to about $10 million in the next 24 months. And eternally, everything is kind of focused around that. And we are kind of seeing a lot of inbound interest post the Binance acquisition. So that was kind of more like a trigger point post Binance acquisition. A lot of other companies, including exchanges, are kind of keen to kind of get into the India market. They are talking with us. Some of them want to kind of invest. Some of them want to kind of collaborate. So some of these things are happening. If we see some kind of long-term partner, strategic partner that we kind of see is out there, would love to kind of go ahead and kind of raise around along with that.
Yeah. Okay. Good stuff. I guess the kind of Indian startup ecosystem a little bit more broadly. It seems like it's kind of having a moment, I guess now maybe. It's there's a lot of pride. It seems like there's a lot of momentum. You mentioned Flipkart as being one of the businesses you worked with in your first business, obviously a high profile acquisition there. Anything you want to add on just kind of the startup ecosystem in India, how you see it growing?
Right. So you would see a lot of interesting fintech products from India that would be ported to the world. So essentially, in this particular decade, what happened was 2000 to 2010 was more like a lost decade for India. There was not a lot of innovations on the startup end. The infra was not there. Say even the network bandwidth and other things were not there. India is a mobile first country. So there would hardly be, with a country of 1.3 billion people, there would not be more than 100 million laptops or desktop devices that would be out. So, but in terms of the smartphone penetration, that's upwards of 500 million. Even with respect to the 4G penetration, the 4G penetration started kicking after, there's a company called Jio. Jio is the largest mobile phone network in the world now. So they launched in 2016.
That was the largest in the world. This is that brother rivalry story too, right?
Yes, Mukesh Ambani.
Yeah.
Right. So they launched it about 3 years back, and now they have more subscribers than the entire population of the United States.
Wow.
So they have like 380 million subscribers within 3 years. So that was a crazy growth story that kind of happened, and that basically bought access to everyone. So the data rates in India are the cheapest in the world. So, like, I get a data of roughly around 60 gigabytes for $3 in a month.
Wow. Yeah, so I'm paying about 50 times that.
Yeah. So that's kind of insanely crazy, and that's precisely why India is the largest consumer of things like TikTok and other things.
Interesting. Yeah.
Right. Right. So that sort of a curve is kind of happening. Interestingly, and I kind of also mentioned that the fintech ecosystem is kind of also pretty innovative. We have the banking ecosystem is one of the most advanced in the world. So there is a lot of interesting plays that are kind of happening on top of that. And we'll kind of see some interesting innovations getting built in India and getting ported across the world. Well, the world adopts it. So the Google CEO is kind of a lot more keen to bring the payment ecosystem that India has into US so that the entire infrastructure kind of moves pretty fast.
Interesting. And he's certainly not the only Indian CEO, high profile in the Valley now either.
Right. So again, Microsoft CEO, IBM CEO, MasterCard, a lot of these are kind of all Indians.
Yep. Very bullish. Well, good stuff. Thoughts on even kind of taking a further step back, thoughts on kind of Bitcoin now broadly. You've talked a lot about how you think about kind of onboarding new users into Bitcoin. Really enjoyed kind of your thoughts on the strategy around those pieces. How are you feeling about kind of global market, Bitcoin now heading to the halving? And how are you seeing kind of the sentiment in India around Bitcoin heading into this next bull run? I think it's probably a wise move to hold onto your cards after having gotten through the bear market here. Knock on wood. Kind of last broad thoughts.
So there's a lot of excitement around halving. A lot of them are kind of fairly bullish around the prospect. I personally am kind of hoping that whatever Tim Draper has said in terms of the price prediction comes out to be. It came out true till 2018. I'm expecting that to kind of happen again.
There you
if
go.
that happens, nothing like it. There's kind of a fairly bullish statement, but that seemed true even in 2014. Of course, the market cap and other factors would kind of come into place. If the market cap goes to something of that sort, that's going to be extreme. But as a whole, I see at least in the next few years, say in a 5 or 6 year range, we'll definitely be kind of getting closer to gold's market cap. And the way I kind of see it is, say Barnes and Nobles was a bookstore, Amazon was a e-tail bookstore, but Amazon became 100 times larger than what Barnes and Nobles would become, right? That's the same equivalent with gold. Gold is not transportable, movable, or anything of that sort. If Bitcoin kind of comes into being, there is a substantially large value that can kind of get created. In terms of the ecosystem, there are certain things that are kind of still unanswered, where there is a lot of kind of misconception, something like Tether, right? So there's a lot of misconception, and people do not know what can happen in the case, say something abrupt happens with Tether, right? What would be, say, the price equation or something of that sort that would kind of come into being. But as a whole, I'm kind of fairly bullish with respect to what sort of work is happening, even with Lightning Labs. I've been closely following them. We are kind of working on introducing some of these features as well to user. Hey, you can buy, say, a gift card of Amazon or Flipkart using Lightning, and we're working on a collaboration with a few players to kind of enable that. So the idea is take baby steps, get more people onto the ecosystem, make them at least explore what is Bitcoin, what is Lightning, what's a Lightning wallet, what is a custodial wallet, what is non-custodial. So over a period of time, if they've already explored this, there is a larger chance they will be able to kind of get into something that's more frictionless.
Yeah, very Bitcoin centric thought process. I like it. And how big is your team now and your kind of developer group working on these things?
Right. So the overall team strength, so we run about 7 different products. So Buyhatke is one, BitBnS is one. We have similarly 7 different products. So we have a total team strength of about 45 people. 30 plus of them are developers, designers that kind of work on, and then the rest of it is growth team and business development.
Perfect. I have really enjoyed this conversation. I learned a lot myself. We'll have to do it again in person and dive even deeper into this stuff. India is such a fascinating market right now. The last question, actually, a recommendation. So this is anyone who's traveling to India, maybe specifically to y'all's headquarters. What's one recommendation you have? Can be a restaurant, type of food, a book about it, movie about the place. Any recommendation for someone who's going to be visiting the country?
Anyone who's kind of visiting the Bangalore part or the southern part of India, do visit our office. That's fun. I'll personally take you to places that you can eat kick-ass food. So Indian food is kind of pretty varied. So you go. I've stayed in like 17 odd different countries, and over a period of time, I usually used to get bored with the food because India has so many different varieties that are out there. So India is about 29 states, and each state is more like a country in itself.
Okay.
Each has a pattern with respect to food, what sort of food they kind of cook, create, and all. So you're never kind of left out for choices. And if you kind of are coming to the southern part, Bangalore, definitely kind of visit the local shops here and try and eat idli. Idli is something that is kind of pretty famous.
Okay.
If you're visiting northern side, try parathas. Aloo parathas are kind of pretty well done in Delhi and other regions there. Cool. So in Bangalore, definitely visit our office. I'll guide you more.
Perfect. Well, good pitch. You can sideline at the tourism board too. Good stuff. And then where can people find you? You're on Twitter. Anywhere else?
Yeah, so I'm on Telegram, I'm on Twitter, anywhere if a user needs to kind of. So I kind of write my title as Chief Entertainment Officer. So the idea is I need to entertain customers, I need to entertain users, I need to entertain investors or anyone advisors on that end. So that's my job. I'm be happy to kind of chat.
Love it. Well, thanks for the time, and we'll catch up again soon. Bye.
Great talking to you, John. Thanks a lot for hosting me.
For sure. Quick reminder, all of the content in this episode is for informational purposes only. You should not construe any such information or other material as legal, tax, investment, financial, or other advice. Nothing contained in this presentation constitutes a solicitation, recommendation, endorsement, or offer by BTC Media, the Let's Talk Bitcoin podcast network, or any third-party service provider to buy or sell any securities or other financial instruments.